We've talked layer 2 to the edge, now it's time to talk layer 3 to the edge. Makes you wonder, what would a layer 1 to the edge solution look like? By the end of our time here together, we will be able to describe the benefits and drawbacks to a layer 3 access design. In the last video, we saw that there were some drawbacks to the layer 2 design. So in this video, we want to take a look at layer 3 and figure out, hey, does this solve all of our problems? Let's find out. Let's draw out our topology once again, where we have our two distribution switches connected together, and we have access layer switches down here. Now in the previous video, we talked about how we'd extend layer 2 down to these access layer switches. And in that design, we had a layer 3 boundary that existed here, where we're talking upstream to the core at layer 3 and downstream at layer 2. Well, the idea behind layer 3 access layer extensions is to move that boundary down here, where we have layer 3 between the distribution layer and the access layer, and layer 2 down to the clients. Flat out, the biggest benefit to this solution is that we have a loop-free topology. We don't have to worry about spanning tree anymore. We don't have to worry about these loops forming because we're running routing protocols now. We're running OSPF or EIGRP, or dare I say RIP. There's probably not a whole lot of RIP out there these days. But OSPF and EIGRP, just some kind of layer 3 routing protocol that's going to enable us to route traffic between these two layers. This requires some additional configuration. For one, again, these routing protocols that we're going to have to configure. For two, our SVIs, our switch virtual interfaces, these are going to exist down here at the access layer. Incidentally, because we're now running layer 3 on these switches, these will need to be multi-layer switches or layer 3 switches. They'll need layer 3 capabilities, and this, by the way, is often going to run the cost up. So we've already hit one of our disadvantages to this design, is that usually it costs more money. The other concern is now we have layer 3 complexity versus layer 2 complexity. So yes, we got rid of loops and spanning tree configurations. That was layer 2 complexity. But now we have to worry about these routing protocols and troubleshooting any issues that arise. So we've moved that complexity into the layer 3 domain. That's not necessarily a downside because either way we have complexity. It's just which one are we more comfortable with, layer 2 versus layer 3. Now we do have one big disadvantage to this, and it's going to be very similar to that loop-free layer 2 topology we talked about at the end, which is that we can't have hosts on the same subnet attached to two different access layer switches. That's because there's now layer 3 segmentation between these two access layer switches, and so we can no longer have, for example, VLAN 10 shared between these. We'd have to put this host onto a different VLAN, which means they can't share a subnet. So when it comes to the advantages of this solution, yeah, we've got a loop-free topology and we have no spanning tree. Those are the two biggest advantages. Now, as far as the drawbacks are concerned, we do have a few different ones. For one, we talked about the money. We have to worry about the added cost of this solution. And for two, again, no VLANs between access layer switches. And honestly, between the two of these, the biggest restriction is going to be the money. Because we usually have a lot of these access layer switches out on the network. And to upgrade all of them to layer 3 capabilities will take a significant investment. However, we do still have problems around not sharing VLANs between access layer switches, and so that definitely is a limitation as well. In the end, if we're going to move to a layer 3 design, we have to be absolutely certain that we do not need the same VLAN to be spread to multiple places in the network. Now, from a real-life, real-world perspective, we don't see a whole lot of layer 3 designs to the access layer, and part of that is because these disadvantages, the loop-free topology and the spanning tree protocol, the risk that these problems introduce has been greatly lowered by new technologies that we're going to explore in the next video. And with that, you are now able to describe the benefits and drawbacks to a layer 3 access design. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.